qualification were an extraordinary example of democracy. That instead of your teacher deciding whether you were going to get a CSE, which for many young people always felt like a second-rate qualification, not for all, but for many, instead of your teacher deciding that before you even did the second part of your course, you were being told by Kenneth Baker for the first time, whatever your background, there is a general qualification. It was an extraordinary moment, just as the national curriculum was a moment. I think we have to acknowledge that. The problems are that it was designed in an era when young people were leaving school, in many cases at 16, and therefore you needed something then. And that will lead me, as we start to talk about GCSEs now, into what's different about that. But while we just continue to think about GCSEs then, it's a popular brand. It's a well understood brand. AQA's survey today shows that young people continue to trust in that as a brand. So although there will be some people who are saying radical reform, let's scrap GCSE is the way to go, I would be very cautious about that, and we would as an association. But as you will hear, we will talk about how there needs to be an evolution in it. And one of the reasons for that is that no young person leaves their school or college at 16 now, but 70% of them move to a different institution. And therefore, I think we owe them, and particularly after the past 2 years, the sense of the externality that they haven't had, but where somebody who is not my teacher has made a decision about the grade I should get, that has counted for a lot of young people, I think. So we start by paying tribute to Kenneth Baker and a groundbreaking qualification, and that brings us to GCSEs now. What I'd like to suggest is there are 5 issues that we ought to start to try and address with them. The first I've mentioned. We are not in the same era now, and therefore the idea that the average young person at 16 sits 27, 28 or 29 papers, not just hours, papers, just seems eye-watering. And what it's done is to create a whole industry and the risks that are around a whole industry of exams taking place, leaks on the internet and all of that kind of stuff. Is this not time to rein in and get some greater sense of proportionality, some greater mix of how we assess young people and not reduce them to a grade? But I'll come back to that at the end. Our second point is that now more than in 1988, and you remember Kenneth Baker brought in the national curriculum, Ofsted, performance tables, all of that stuff that's now become the norm here. What that has led to is that we pile a weight of accountability onto GCSE, so that for Tom here, it's not just giving him his GCSE grades, it's also being used to judge his teacher, it's being used to judge his head teacher, and in many cases it's used to judge the school, sometimes with catastrophic consequences there. And I can illuminate that later on if you want to hear why that's catastrophic. That's not good for the school system, because people are more reluctant to go and work in the kind of schools where it is going to be harder to get the kind of grades which would allow you to feel comfortable in your own skin. But frankly, it's proving not good for reasons of our making for young people. Because as Manda Spielman said when she went into a history lesson with a Year 7 student, the first thing the teacher said is, today we're going to study this topic because it'll be in your GCSE history in Year 11. Now that isn't a problem with GCSEs, it's a problem with our response to GCSEs and allowing accountability to narrow the curriculum and to drive bad behaviours, it seems to me. Third point, the EBAC, another form of accountability, has narrowed the curriculum, so that the kind of things which have been the pride of the English education system, the arts for example, or the need for design technologists, have felt to many people as if they're being bedeviled by a kind of snobbery that says some subjects are much more important than others. Now, of course, some subjects are much more important than others. That's why we place such an emphasis on English and maths. But are we really saying that design technology is less important than history or less important than geography? And how are you making that decision? So there's something we could do around stripping that back and getting a broad and balanced curriculum. And the Askell view, if you look at our blueprint today, is we really ought to be able to give children the dignity of a qualification that shows the basics and the academic subjects, but allows them also, if they're starting to follow a technical or vocational route before 16, for that to be showing up as well there. And my final point would be, as many of you will be predicting, that at the moment our system is built on trying to avoid grade inflation. That will seem ironic at the end of these 2 years, but that's the norm, is to try and reduce grade inflation. And I was frustrated as a head for all of those years that the front page of the Daily Telegraph was, yet more kids getting more top grades, standards are slipping. It always struck me as odd that we were told by secretaries of state every year that we've got the best generation of teachers ever, and yet we weren't allowed to show that grades were ever improving. However, let's not get into the debate about that, because that's just about the teaching profession. More significant is the fact that 30% plus, 35% of young people will get a grade 3. That's after being taught by early years, being taught by primary and secondary teacher. And when I said to the former schools minister, what do you think it feels like to get a grade 3 after 12 years? He said, why do you fixate on a grade 3? I said, because you fixate on a grade 4. You call a grade 4 a standard pass. So what do you think a grade 3 is, Minister? To which he said, presumably it's a good fail. Well, how dare we do that? How dare we tell young people at the end of 12 years, of all of those people, that we can't give them the dignity of a qualification? It's not just the qualification, it's the pathways that are then closed off to them. They won't become social workers, teaching assistants, they won't go into the police, they will go onto a hamster wheel in their local FE college of simply resitting with dwindling consequences there. So one of the things ASCL would want to do is to say, could you, in basics of maths and basics of English, rip out a qualification that demonstrates that you can do the basics in English and the basics of maths, and our starting point is, how could we, the teaching profession, get far more than 70% of young people those qualifications and dignity which comes from it. That's it.
Thank you.